Hey everybody, welcome to week 5 of our Winter Victory Garden video series, our conversations with backyard gardeners. This week we are going to be hearing from our gardeners on plants and animals that visit their garden, whether they're welcome, and maybe some steps that they take to try to deter some of these visitors. We're going to hear what gardeners are excited about this season and also some words of advice from everybody. So come and join us. What are some examples of native plants and or animals that have visited your garden?
Let's see what's come up, because there's a lot of stuff in the seed banks. Actually, little blue stem came up on its own. That was pretty exciting. And blue-eyed grass came up on its own, and that was exciting. And all different kinds of asters. They're wonderful for the butterflies, not the butterflies, I'm sorry, the bees, because they're one of the very, very last things to bloom. So the late season bees, I mean, that's like their last thing that they can feed on. But I mean, purple coneflowers, you cannot have enough purple coneflowers because people plant the milkweed, for the monarch butterflies, but that's what they lay their eggs on. They need nectar plants and they love coneflowers. I mean, it's like a traffic jam at the coneflowers. And there's the purple coneflowers, and then the yellow ones, the black-eyed Susans are really good. Goldenrod is great, got the right kind. And yeah, Monarda, boy, if you ever want to have some fun just watching the hummingbirds, just watch them fight over the Monarda. It's just so cute. And the most wonderful thing was the oaks, because early on I had Fish and Wildlife come to tell me how I should deal with the wild parts of the property. And she said it was oak savanna. Oaks have come back, and from what I've read, oaks is like one of the best things to have for the widest variety of wildlife birds and the different flying butterflies and bugs and everything else, and the animals too, the deer and the turkeys and everything with the acorns. And those were definitely all in the seed bank.
I leave lamb's quarters and amaranth and stuff grow in the garden because that to me is far more nutritious than anything I could buy seeds for. Those are wonderful plants. I like wild plants. Purslane, I have a lot of purslane. Amaranth and lamb's quarters I will harvest and freeze too. Nutrition wise, it's far superior to anything you can buy in the grocery store. Anything other, that's been, even kale, way more highly nutritious than kale.
Which animals that visit your garden are welcome? And what are some animals that visit your garden that you would try to discourage?
Well, I want all the birds to visit except for during blueberry time when the robins and the wrens try to eat all the blueberries and the raspberries. That I'm not real thrilled about. The rest of the time, I want the birds in the garden. I don't like that the deer jump over the fence into the garden because they have plenty to eat outside. And I don't like the squirrels and the chipmunks because they eat the strawberries.
Quite a bit of the effort that I have put into gardening is involved in trying to keep the animal visitors away. Because I grow sweet corn, then I have to keep out deer and raccoons. And then we have woodchucks in our area that can do a lot of damage in a hurry if they get in. And this year chipmunks were eating too many tomatoes. They're welcome just outside the fence.
Right.
Yeah.
So we also get a lot of squirrels and chipmunks that are visiting. They're not particularly welcome. The squirrels like to dig around a lot, especially if I've just direct seeded something, which is not very helpful. They also dig up garlic. The chipmunks, as far as I know, mostly like to come and take a bite out of a tomato, usually the redder the better, and then run away.
Lots of birds. I have lots and lots of birds around, and I plant things specially for them. I have shrubs and stuff that are for the birds and the sunflowers. And I plant, I have other perennial things that the birds like. That's one thing I look at when I'm planting perennials is what is going to feed things around me. I always see toads and frogs and garter snakes and sometimes skinks and turtles. When we have there's a lake close to us, so we see snapping turtles coming through, and rabbits. I have rabbits, and so far they haven't bothered too much. I figured out that they like that little white clover better than they like kale and spinach and that kind of stuff. So I leave some of that in the garden, and that's what they'll go eat. And then striped gophers, there was just all kinds of them this summer. I do have moles, and I'm trying to figure out how to discourage them. And the other thing that's is pocket gophers, because I have crop fields around me, so there's pocket gophers. So those I trap, because they can wreck stuff in a big hurry. And then I never used to have deer. My dad's house was right next door, and he had a dog, so the deer never came by me. But there's no dog, so the deer have found my garden, and they're nipping the tips of things. So, but they don't do enough damage to, warrant me doing anything about it yet.
We got very up and close and personal with a pair of baby deer last year who were not afraid of us at all and would sleep in our tomatoes, like to eat a lot of our chard and beets. We had a lot of rabbit visitors that liked our tender broccoli transplants and took out like 50 feet of broccoli transplants. Monarchs, we have monarchs, a lot of swallowtails on our dill and parsley. I welcome most insects. I'd say like most insects that I've encountered have been beneficial insects. There's really only a few species that are really big red flags and warning signs. So most insects I welcome. Unfortunately, most like larger mammals are usually trouble if they're in your garden. So like squirrels, rabbits, deer, raccoons like to pick your corn. So yeah, they usually mean trouble. It doesn't mean that they're not welcome. So we always planted more than we needed when we had the space. And that's sort of just a good rule of thumb, is to plant more than you need in case some wildlife wants to get a taste, so you're not totally out of luck if they do take a taste.
Yeah, they're all welcome. I can share. They were here before me. It's one of those where I don't need the whole harvest. I just don't want them to take it all. The birds, I love seeing the birds. Most people don't want critters in their garden, but it's another part of the fun experience of gardening, is that by building a baseball field, you bring in baseball players. By setting a table for more than one to eat, you are naturally going to have guests. And so gardening is that. You've got all this great food. They're going to want to try some. And if you like nature, gardening makes it happen.
So do you have any tips or tricks for pest control in your garden?
Floating row covers are good for things that don't need to be pollinated. So like if you want to put them over your lettuce or your broccoli, let's see. Well, if you have the birds and the bees and stuff, you don't really have a huge amount of pests. The worst one, of course, is the potato bugs, because I don't think anything likes to eat them. But you really need, and this is a thing that I can't stress too much for people, you do actually need bugs in all your plants, because if you like birds, what birds feed their young is not seeds. So it doesn't matter how many seeds you put out. They don't feed seeds to their young. They feed them bugs. They need to, sometimes they'll make up to like 75 or 80 trips a day back and forth to feed their young. So they have to have bugs that close. And they have to have basically soft-bodied bugs and worms and things like that. So if they're near your garden, they need to have those things to eat. So when you see a bug, don't spray it, don't kill it, pick anything off that's really, really messing up your stuff. But other than that, just let them go, especially on your flowers. Like every year, my purple cone flowers, some of them, the caterpillars take over and they just go nuts on them. But then after a while, they make their cocoons and then the butterflies come out and then they grow their leaves back. Doesn't hurt the flower, doesn't hurt the plant, but it's just so important to just leave the bugs alone. And that's something I really had to learn, that whole integrated idea of gardening is like, it's not all about you and having it look like Better Homes and Gardens all the time. It's for all the creatures.
I think the biggest thing is to make sure you have a variety of plants growing, keep the density of plants. That's probably one of the things that I don't do well enough, is things get too thick and then stuff gets damp, and there's hiding places for all kinds of things.
So often I end up covering things with some remay or agricultural cloth or what have you, so that they don't bother things after I've planted them. So most of what I've done is physical separation. So covering things, rabbit fencing, deer fencing.
Keeping fencing securing and an electric fence is a part of what I've had to do as a gardener.
I'd say a really good fence is good for the larger mammals and animals that would like to disturb your garden. Just like preventative stuff, really, like a really good fence with chicken wire at an L at the bottom to prevent the burrowing and digging critters, and planting like a variety of flowers and herbs in your garden actually is really great at deterring pests. Apparently, there's some evidence that the scents and like silhouettes of different types of vegetation confuse the bad pests, the bad insects from your produce. So yeah, planting a variety of herbs and flowers to attract the beneficial insects will hopefully just like naturally deter the detrimental insects.
What's one thing that you're really excited about in your garden this year? And I guess either last year or the coming year.
Well, I'm excited to see what the garlic does. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that grows and does well. Well, it's always fun. I plant in my little tiny greenhouse in October. I plant spinach, 2 rows of spinach in there, and let it come up. You know, it's just starting to get its first 2 true leaves, and then that'll sit all winter. And it's always fun to watch that come up. As soon as the days get long enough and the soil gets warm enough in there in the springtime, I'll have spinach a month and a half before I would outside in the soil. So that's all the fun thing.
Oh my gosh, I've been planting all these native plants and stuff, and every year it gets better. It just gets amazing. Like there's more and more flowers and more butterflies, and it's just like, I'm just so excited every year to see, because now they bloom at different times. So it's like I kind of mark the entire spring and summer and fall by what's coming in bloom, what's in bloom, what's the next thing. And it's just really exciting to just watch them all come and go and what visits them.
I planted my eggplants too early or too late this last year, so I'm excited to start my eggplants earlier this year so they could actually have a chance to fruit. My eggplants, I had like 8 plants, and by the time of the first frost, I had 1 eggplant that was like this big, and I sliced it up and put it on a pizza because I refused to throw it away. But that's all we produced.
I'm excited for the varieties that I've planted that haven't produced yet. And for me, in large part, it's apples and some blueberries, because they take years to produce. And so also cherries. I have a cherry tree that I'm wanting to produce as well. You plant something and you watch it grow. You know, it's like it takes a long time. And with apples, you know, and pears and a lot of these, it can be 3, 5, even 10 years before you get anything. And so, you know, there's a lot of patience with that, but when it does come, that's what I'm excited about.
For me, it was just the pleasure of the new garden. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do to improve it next year. I'm excited to get I've got some compost that should be ready in the spring. I'm excited to turn it over. We're having a little warm weather now, and so I can work with that one more time before winter hits, and then hopefully in the spring I can get that on there, and I'm excited about that.
I am excited to plan better and be more conscious of the mistakes I've made in the past and avoid them, and see whether or not I actually get better results. I tend to plant mostly the same things every year, so I don't have anything that's new and exciting. That's not necessarily anything that drives me as a home gardener, but I would be very happy to do some of the things that I haven't done very well better.
What is one piece of advice that you would share with someone just getting started on their own gardening journey?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest things that I've learned that I didn't really realize was the importance of nutrients in the soil. So, like adding amendments could make a huge difference. If you're just growing and you can't figure out what's wrong, nothing's working out, get a soil test, see what you might be deficient in, and add amendments. So, like up here, there's a lot of clay in the soil and it's a very acidic soil. You can still work with it. Like potash is very basic and you can add that to your soil to balance out the acidity. I also learned that both broccoli and like tomatoes, there's a few things that are really heavy feeders. Some vegetables that you wouldn't realize that are heavy feeders that really like blood meal or like composted manure. Doing your research on your plant varieties and finding out how much nutrients they like and giving them the nutrients they need.
I would advise new gardeners to not be overwhelmed, but to allow your gardening to expand what you're thinking about and interested in terms of you get the blight and so you figure out how to put up a hoop, or you want to grow kale into November and you learn about remate, or you want to augment your soil so you figure out composting. And if you take it a step further, then I'd recommend getting a soil test, a soil analysis, and figure out what kinds of augmenting you could do.
Listen to the spacing guides on the packages. It's going to seem ridiculous, but if you don't, actually what you could do is take one bed and plant things the way you think would work, and then take another bed or two and plant following the planting instructions and just see if there's a difference. Maybe I should do that. Anyway, that would be those would be my two pieces of advice. And water.
I would say find a mentor. If you have a friend that you know is into cooking or gardening, pick their brain a little bit about it. And even like neighbors who maybe know what your soil type is in your area or have gardened before. That's why I really like the community garden model actually. So if there are community gardens in your area, even if there aren't plots available, maybe you could talk and chat to some of the gardeners there, talk about how they grow in that area.
Talk to other gardeners, like ask other gardeners, like I want to grow tomatoes. How do I do it? What do I do? I think that's the biggest step. Reach out. Many years ago when I reached out to Tom Martell and the growing grapes, in some ways I could not have grown the grapes I grow without that, without Tom and his impact on me. So whatever it is you want to grow, reach out to those gardeners growing it, and they will get you ahead of the curve.
Maybe another piece of advice is it's really nice if you're a starting gardener to find somebody that's gardened for a while and to just talk to people. Just amazing how many people and how much of a connection you can make with people when you start talking about gardening. Some people do flowers, some people do big vegetable gardens, some people do house plants, but it's just such a great connection with people.
Be realistic, I guess, about what you can do. Don't start too big if you're the kind of person that might get overwhelmed by those things and then be frustrated by the fact that you suddenly have this massive amount of work to do that you're not exactly sure how to approach. So maybe start small and get your processes down and add a couple things every year.
Don't take on too much. Start small till you figure out what works for you and what you can manage, because a garden can get overwhelming very quickly, and too many people start out strong, and then by the time July gets here, it's just one big weed patch, and they kind of just throw up their hands and give up. Make it so you enjoy it. Don't take on so much that it's just this drudgery you have to go out there. Make it fun somehow. Bean teepees for your kids, or do some plant, if you have children, find things that they want and get them involved. That would be great. great thing to do.
It doesn't all have to happen
Hmm.
at once, and it's never ever going to be perfect. So it's a matter of just finding the pleasure in what you're able to do at any particular time, and just remembering that if it's not bringing you that much pleasure, then you can scale it back. You can let it go. You don't have to do it all in 1 year.
It's one of those things that enjoy it, have fun, don't stress. There's always next year. Just enjoy it for whatever it is. If you planted something and it's getting attacked by some critters, I mean, it really could destroy your garden because, everything that you put into it is done. Deer could have moved in the night before and nibbled all around the tree, or mice or moles or voles, and just killed it. And it could be the end. But if you can find enjoyment in it for itself, not for the fruit, not for the blossom, not for the look, but just enjoyment for being out there and doing it, you're going to continue to do it. You're going to replant, this time with a fence around it to protect it, maybe a collar around the stem, and then you'll have success. But if you enjoy it, you won't give up, you'll keep going, and you're only going to get better.
Don't worry about making mistakes. Don't worry that sometimes things don't make it. Just be in it and just watch it, because it's like every year you'll understand more and more, and it'll just become more a part of you, because it's a connection with the earth, it's connection with all of nature, it's connection with other people, and so it's just like a thing. And it's also, I just think it's good for the soul, good for the spirit.
Well, so that was really fun. Was there anything in particular that kind of jumped out at you, Sal, that you thought was really interesting?
Yeah, I would love to just go back to early on in the interviews. We heard about Kathy talking about harvesting weeds to eat in her garden, the edible ones. And I was just so impressed that, she knows that these are so fresh and super nutrient dense that she's not just eating them, she is preserving them,
Yeah.
which is, something I would have never thought of, but what a great idea.
Yeah, that was really awesome to hear. One thing that really jumped out at me that I guess I knew, but I didn't really know, was when Sue was talking about the fact that birds feed their young insects. They don't feed them seeds. And I guess I always knew that, but I never really put that together. So it was really fun to hear her talk about that, and just talking about how important it is to not worry so much about the insects that are in our garden, and, just get rid of the ones that are really causing you big problems, but that we need those insects, and that the birds need those insects.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like, folks were saying, like, they know kind of which plants they're going to get maybe attacked by insects, but which ones are a big deal. And sounds like a lot of them aren't. Some insects, they're just really going to be there for just a little while, and then they're going to go away. And, there's just a few pests to worry about. But overall, it sounds like people are gardening along with nature more so than, there's a few things that sounded like we really want to keep deterring that are going to cause a lot of damage. But overall, they're really kind of, bringing more nature into the garden, more so than just keeping it out.
Yeah, that's true. It seemed like really, as far as pests go, that people were most worried about some of the bigger mammals. So obviously we heard a lot of people talk about fencing. But I think just, also that acknowledgement that, I think it was Steve that said they were here first. And, I just really liked that people seem to be very much in tune with the natural surroundings, and not so much trying to fight against it, but just trying to come to this agreement, right? Don't take everything, so.
Right. And I mean, that's a part of the fun too, I think, for some people is, there's the joy of gardening and growing this food, but then there's also this joy of, look at all the wildlife, or look at all of these, native plants that are around me.
Well, one of the things too that I feel like a lot of people were touching on was just how gardening can be a gateway to learning, right? And it's like there's always things to learn. It's never going to be perfect, and that's actually part of what can be exciting about it, is that there's just always something new to dig into and to learn about gardening.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty incredible. Just thinking about the amount of experience that these different gardeners have. And when we talk about what they're excited about, it's new. There's so much new, even after all these years. It's new varieties, it's new styles, new, yeah, just something to learn and try to put to practice in the garden.
Yeah, and even after, decades and decades of gardening, I mean, most of these people have been gardening for a really long time. And just the fact that there's always ways to improve and hone in on their skills and new things to learn. It's like, I think that's what can really, one of the things that can really make it like a lifelong pursuit, is because it's never rote, it's never routine, it's always interesting and exciting. By the end, when people were giving advice to new gardeners, it was like, that theme of like learning and finding joy and finding enjoyment just kind of kept surfacing.
Yeah, I mean, it was surprising to me after listening to everybody that really the biggest message that I'm getting from this is to enjoy it, to use this as, that gardening is not just food production.
Mhm.
Gardening can be anything, it can be whatever you want it to be. And the most important thing is that you enjoy it, that your sister said or Barb said, to take pleasure in what you're doing, make sure that you're enjoying the process. So that was great advice for me too. It was great advice for me to hear that and remember, am I enjoying this? I should make sure that I'm having a good time out there.
Yeah, that was a theme that everybody echoed back to, and I think is really important and encouraging.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to hearing from all of our, all of you out there, all of our victory gardeners, just hearing what do you enjoy? What are your favorite parts of gardening? Like that is something that I'm really looking forward to this season, is hearing what people are having the most fun doing.
Thanks so much for joining us on this winter series journey. And pretty soon we're gonna just take a little break here, and then pretty soon we will be back at our regular Victory Garden series.
We hope that you had a really good time listening to this series. We had a lot of fun filming it, and all of our backyard gardeners, thank you so much. We really appreciate, we know you're out there watching your videos and learning from your peers. So we just appreciate you joining us and volunteering your time to, and your knowledge to share with our larger gardening community. So we hope to see you all and be involved with you all as we go into this next season. As always, we're going to link back to last year's videos if you want to review them and get prepared for this next season. You can subscribe to the Farm Table YouTube channel to make sure that you stay on top of all of our new free content that we're posting. And as always, our Victory Garden videos are made and produced for free, so we can make sure to get this knowledge out there to anybody that would like it. And we are, Farm Table's a nonprofit, so we are funded by donations. And if you would like to make a donation in any amount, feel free to head over to the website at farmtablefoundation.org. Click the donate button on top of the page. And then any donation, big or small, will help us keep producing this content. Just write that it's for the Victory Garden in the notes section. And we really appreciate all of your support, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.